Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host Sabine M, and today I'm joined by Nicholas Conzone. Nicholas blends science, journalism, and photography to shine a light on overlooked ecosystems. You may have seen his stunning photo of Ocala National Forest featured in National Geographic's Best of the World 2025. Or stories on invasive parasites and armored catfish threatening Florida's fragile waters. But behind every story is a journey, and today we're exploring his. How a kid with a camera and a love for the outdoors ended up documenting the front lines of environmental change. Nick's work is rooted in Central Florida springs, scrublands, and species, mainly of which are vanishing before our eyes. We hear how his background in aerospace engineering and digital media led to a new kind of mission, using visual storytelling as a force for nature conservation. Welcome to the podcast, Nick. I'm happy to have you here. And let's start at the beginning. What first sparked your connection with nature and conservation?
Yeah, it's weird how everything just kind of congealed together, all of my different interests. Eventually, what got me into conservation photography is, I had no clue. At the time, I was either going to buy a motorcycle or a camera. I'd started working at the magazine. I was like, man, I love this photography thing. I'd really love to travel and ride around a motorcycle, but maybe I should also, look into getting a camera. Of course, I decided on getting a camera. It was like a Nikon D500, something fairly cheap, but like entry level, a good camera. And I just went around and started photographing everything. I had no clue. And then one day I was out hiking out in Gainesville, Florida, I think at like a sinkhole, and I saw this green tree frog nestled in a palmetto. And the green tree frog's really cool. It has almost like the same striping golden color and green color as a palmetto or a palm leaf. And it was nestled in that palmetto in this like dead brush. And I took the photo, and as soon as I looked, I was like, oh man, this is sick. And I was editing the photo, and I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do nature photography. It was like it all just congealed together. It just all worked out. Yeah.
We had a lot of similar experiences because my first then camera to take photos was also, I think, pretty much the same camera as you got then.
Oh, really?
I used it for travel photography. Yes,
that's awesome.
That's how I got into filmmaking then.
No, I wore that camera out, and the shutter was so loud. The Nikon D500, even in silent mode, it wasn't mirrorless. It was DSLR, and
yeah.
One time I was filming a black bear. I believe it had cataracts and it couldn't see me well. And I was on the other side of this forest road. It was completely dry out, very little water. So it was relying on this mud hole to drink water. So I knew it was going to be there. This is very early on in my nature photography realm. Never been that close to a black bear before. And eventually it started to smell me. So it sat there and had its nose up, sniffing at me, trying to figure out where the heck I was, what the heck I was. At that point, I'm just super freaked out. I have no clue what's going to happen. And the shutter, I just stopped taking photos because every time I would click, the bear would go, huh, what was that? And it was just like so I just stopped taking photos. At that point, I was like, I'm just staying here. Eventually, some old beat up forest truck drove by and, scared off the bear. The bears are pretty smart. They'll sneak away and come back out. But yeah, no, I wore out that camera. Yeah, very awesome camera at the time.
Yeah, I had it in my backpack on every trip, so it's seen a lot of the world. But it's quite big as well, and with the lenses, so it's not so nice to carry around compared to a mirrorless camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I switched to all mirrorless, still Nikon. But yeah, using I love the Z9, and I also use the Z7 for underwater photography. Yeah.
I switched to Sony, got away from Nikon.
Why is that?
For the film cameras. Maybe because I started filming more, so I thought Sony might be a little bit better.
Gotcha.
Now I use the Sony FX3 for filming, and before that the Sony A7 III. because that was like film and photography, which was good. And then once you have a lot of lenses already for one camera, then you just have to stick with that brand.
Right. Yep, absolutely. No, I never took the time to explore any other camera brands. So when you hear a name like Sony, it just sounds epic and very intimidating.
Yeah.
So yes.
Now, everyone in my university like got the Sony A7 III back then. So I was like, oh, must be good. And it was with photo and video. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And then I already had so many lenses and looked for a more cinema camera. And then I chose the Sony FX3. So I could, still small camera compared to other cinema cameras, but you can travel easy with it and it has an underwater housing for it. So that's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I'll have to look into it.
Mm-hmm. And you've called Central Florida an overlooked conservation treasure. Can you describe what makes it so ecologically unique?
Yeah. Going back to what I like to say is it's hidden in plain sight. It's very easy to just drive by and overlook. When people think of Central Florida. Oh, I should clarify, by the way, Ocala National Forest is in the southernmost region of north central Florida, which is a huge mouthful, right? So I just say it's Central Florida. It's pretty close, but yeah, like Central Florida is like Orlando, and a lot of people think of Disney World, theme parks. So it's very easy to overlook this forested landscape, or even just the scrub landscape, the shallow vegetation, sandy landscape. It's not in your face nature. That's just beautiful right when you directly look at it. In North Carolina, it's just like you can go hike up a mountain and look at the landscape, the autumn leaves, it's just in your face beautiful. In Central Florida, places like Ocala National Forest are very beautiful, but they don't show it. The nature doesn't show it off. It's you really have to dig to see the biocomplexity, the beauty of it all. And it's definitely something I overlooked when I first moved here. And if it wasn't for, seeing the wildlife, exploring these different areas to pursue, to just look at the wildlife, I would have no clue how unique and significant some of this habitat is. Ocala National Forest, for example, is the southernmost national forest in the U.S., and it's also the largest sand pine scrub ecosystem or habitat. So it's a very unique and significant habitat here in Florida. Also one that's endangered, that's being lost through habitat loss, urban sprawl, poor wildfire management, or wildfire suppression, I should say. And so there's lots of significance to it that is hidden in plain sight.
What led you to photojournalism as your main mode of conservation storytelling?
Yeah, photography alone is awesome. It's really cool to be able to get those sharp images, those standalone stills. But I think what I truly love storytelling. I love being able to present something, and having a series of photos that kind of connect the dots of, varying, subtopics for a larger conservation story or issue. Being able to have that variety of photos and having that photojournalism aspect, where you're following the story. I think that's, what intrigues me the most is having that visual. And, I think, who is it? Jacques Cousteau said oh gosh, what is it? It's a famous quote by him. Basically, oh my gosh, I am stumped. Yeah,
I
anyways,
don't know
long
neither. What
story
do you want
short,
to say?
there's this amazing Jacques Cousteau quote, and I can't even think of it. Uh, the first step to understanding is seeing. Boom, there it is. That's the quote. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think that's just what sums up, the importance of photojournalism and conservation. You have to show people why the beauty of these conservation topics, and maybe not even the beauty, maybe the concern, showing that darker side to a conservation topic, and really trying to balance that emotional level to the story with the significant facts and the research or whatever the topic may be. So yeah, that's what intrigues me the most and gets me most excited about doing photojournalism with conservation.
How do you usually find like a story and the thing you want to talk about and make people aware of it? What draws you to a specific topic?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in following your passion, what you are passionate about. So there's these species or these topics that I personally find interest in. Um, so I'll do some research into that. Obviously it's not something I'm passionate about. I might not do a good job, or it might not be. It might be harder to pursue. I might get burnt out or be a little lazy with it. So I think it's very important to have that factor where you're passionate about what you're covering. And yeah, so I just, I'm constantly seeing online the stuff that happens. The amount of information out there present day is just insane. And you can take that information and create a story that's larger scale or more in depth. And yeah, the tough thing is, you might have this passion project in your head that you want to do, but it may not be timely or significant or urgent enough at this time. So you have to put those, from my experience, you have to put those stories on the back burner for a bit. If the opportunity arises to get photos, go take photos. But yeah, maybe there's not that timely or urgent angle that makes the story significant at this time. But if you're passionate about it, you're always going to be thinking about that project. And when the time arises, boom, now you're ready to cover it, and you have some interest and understanding on the topic. And yeah, that's usually how. Sometimes it feels like just winging it. Pursuing these stories with the hope that it turns into something epic. For every success I've had through photography or through storytelling, there's probably been, hundreds of failures, or, dozens of email threads that just dissipated, no longer involved with, that just never turned into anything. So that can be tough. But yeah, trying to pursue those projects that you're passionate about is very important. And just taking the time to figure out, okay, is this urgent and timely enough right now to make it significant present day or at this period in time?
When you then have this story, do you pitch it then, or do you sometimes get commissioned to do a story, or how do you get them then to get published, for example, at National Geographic?
Yeah, so for me, I just pitch the stories. I usually work with a writer. I work with an awesome writer, Suruthi Gurudev. She first reached out to me after seeing some of my work on social media and asked if I, wanted to work on a story together. And then we just started pitching back and forth story ideas. I still consider myself a very entry-level professional photojournalist. And so for me, I kind of have to rely on pitching my projects to, to show that my work might be valuable. And you have to get that photo editor or that editor, whoever, you got to keep yourself in the back of their head. They have to constantly be thinking about you. And they can't do that if you're not you don't have any content out there. They're not going to uh, give you grants or give you commission if they have no clue who you are. And that's a tough reality with photojournalism. Um, I'm very fortunate to be in a situation where I can pursue and have less of that safety net where I can pursue these stories freelance, just pitching them, without the fear of failure. Yeah, early on, you have to be comfortable with failure. But yeah, just constantly, trying to find these stories that you can pitch to people. And don't be afraid to send those emails out and try to get those stories pitched. There's been, and people reach out to me as well. There's smaller projects I've worked on that an editor will say, hey, do you have any photos of this? And I'll send them what I got. They may not be my favorite photos or the perfect photos, but because I took the time to get this random photo that's okay, I'm able to send them something that they can use in a story. So I think it's very important to be available, to be, to be ready with photos when somebody needs them. So yeah, I think it's different for every photographer. The photography greats, of course, they're going to be commissioned for these massive, large-scale projects. And you can apply to stuff, I'm sure you're aware. And it's definitely a point that I am pursuing and would hopefully be at, in the future. But right now, I gotta stick with it and, pitch these projects to people.
Do you always work with the same writer, or do you also sometimes work with scientists that are doing some great work and then, someone is going to write something about that, or definitely they will need some photos that will then get published?
Yeah, so far, so far I've worked with, 2 different writers at this point. It's different for every publication. I've done stuff with like BBC Wildlife Magazine, and I'll collaborate with a writer. We pitch the story together, and honestly, that's the way I prefer pitching stories, is having somewhat of a safety net where it's 2 people that are passionate about this specific topic. You have the writer and you have the photos covered. Usually we'll have the photos done, and then the writer has an idea of who I collaborated with, and then they pitch the story. If it gets accepted, they write it. And I'm very fortunate to be able to work with writers who have experience with publications like Nat Geo, or have tons of experience just pitching stories. So that takes a lot of anxiety and frustration off of me, pitching the story on my own. I can have a professional writer write the pitch. I mean, it's awesome. As far as researchers, there's I'm constantly reaching out to people, trying to find as many angles as possible, as aspects as possible for the stories I work on. I think research is severely underrated. I think it's significantly just very important for conservation. There's so many decisions that are made that are black and white, because we just don't have a full grasp of what the actual conservation issue is. And that's something I've noticed a lot with researchers is there's so many things they want answered, so many questions they want answered with specific topics, but they just don't have the funding or the grant or whatever it may be to pursue that specific research. There's lots of conservation concerns here in Florida that we have an understanding, or at least a theory or hypothesis of what's occurring, what the conservation issue is, but we're solely reliant on the research that's already been done and those hypotheses to express why this should be protected, or why this habitat or species should be protected. I think it's very important to promote the work of researchers. Yeah, some researchers are extremely busy, and it's very difficult to have those projects go through. They have a very tight schedule. It doesn't make them bad people. These are amazing people. They just have a very tight budget. They have to write out exactly what this time and money's going to, and they may not have the resources to babysit you while you take photos. Um, and something that I've found success in is working with researchers that are, maybe lesser known, maybe working with the smaller research team or the solo researcher. Um, Something I'm assuming we'll talk about in a second is the invasive pentostomes that are being found in rattlesnake or just snakes here in Florida. Gina Palmisano is a UCF student. I believe she's either working on her master's or has finished her master's, but she is, all in on invasive pentostome research and snake conservation. And she's extremely passionate about it. She's doing everything on her own with the support of the lab she's in and the college she's in. But working with people who are passionate and ambitious, who are trying to break that wall the same way I am, they're going to be, on the ball, trying to get their work promoted. So when you're a smaller photojournalist working with a lesser known researcher, might be the best thing to do.
Definitely. And also, even though if you have access to bigger researchers, you should still like work with smaller researchers or lesser known ones as well, because their research must or can be just as important as the ones of researchers that are more known, but then no one is going to talk about it because they're not so well known. So I think it's still important to just work with people that are, not so much in the public and not so many people know about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And something that was really cool about that project, that was another, early opportunity where I just recognized how much of an impact a story can have. I remember Jenna was sharing info about after the story. She had like all these different research groups and researchers reaching out to her to join her conservation or research group called SLAM, Snake Lungworm Alliance Monitoring. So now there's not just in Florida, but all over the Southeast, all these researchers taking the time to survey snakes and monitor for invasive snake lungworm. It's really cool to be able to promote these researchers and give them more credibility. And the reality was Gina was doing great on her own. She's doing fantastic work and she's definitely leading the charge. But yeah, it's awesome to see to be able to promote research like that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then when you're taking these photos, what do you think makes them publishable? What are you looking out for? You would say, okay, I need to take the photos in a certain way or edit them in a certain way that it fits for publications like National Geographic.
Yeah. I think that's a very tough one to answer. I think it's, I think in my opinion, the photographers are what make Nat Geo. These publications, they're different publications. I'm sure they look for a certain style of photojournalism or photography, whatever it may be. But I think if you have a significant enough story or concept that your photography is following, and those photos show some sort of artistic or emotional aspect to them, I think they're going to get published. There is somewhat of a style to Nat Geo, and I try my best to follow it. But I don't think there's necessarily like a direct like way to edit them. There's definitely photographers that I am just like, how the heck did they take those amazing photos? and I'll just analyze them and like try to edit or keep that photo in the back of my head while I'm taking photos to get that same style. Um, so it's almost just like just staying with the times, understanding what successful photographers are doing, but also mixing that in with your own style because they're always looking for unique aspects. You have to be yourself. You can't just be a copycat, even though what you're doing is copying every other photographer and then congealing that into your own photography, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. Um, yeah, I will say like for me personally, I always try to get photos that show more than just one subject. Um, that way, you know, the brain has and your eyes have something to look through and just analyze. And it also allows that single photo to tell a larger story. You definitely need to have these, you know, connecting photos that might be a close up of the texture of a fish or, you know, just these different aspects that show significant parts of a species or a habitat. Um, but yeah, overall, I try to have, you know, uh, multiple subjects or multiple aspects to a photo. And that also allows you to kind of just, I describe it as like hanging off of a cliff. You know, there's like a balancing point, and you use those two subjects or those 2 points to kind of create this cool dynamic. You know, you don't want to go crazy with it and make it look super awkward because then you're going to fall off the cliff. But, you know, you don't want to play it safe. Otherwise, you can't look at the view, you know? I think that's a cool metaphor, at least. But yeah, yeah, I think there's, you know, that's what I love most about photography is the creative freedom. And I'm sure there's things I could definitely do to improve my photos. There's definitely things I can do to improve my photos to make it look more National Geographic or, you know, epic and fit that style of whatever publication I'm working with. For the most part, though, I'm taking thousands of photos, narrowing it down to, you know, 1,000 or a couple hundred photos. And then those get narrowed down to whatever the photo editor likes, whatever their team likes. You know, there's so many people that are smarter than me, way above my pay grade, that know what photos to put in their publication. So I also think it's important to just take as many photos as possible, have that endurance while you're taking photos. And that just comes from, you know, practice and constantly seeing with the times, seeing what people are doing with their photography.
Mm. And how do you balance scientific accuracy with emotional storytelling when covering topics like, for example, invasive species?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's a tough one because when we you know, when you do these smaller scale stories, people tend to show this very emotional, radical side of the invasive to native species relationship, where it's almost like this direct problem that's directly killing or destroying a species, which can kind of take away from the complexity of that conservation issue. Because with my goal with covering stories like this is to not just tell the story of this relationship, obviously an awful relationship between a species that was introduced to Florida to a native species, but also to connect that invasive species story to a larger conservation topic. You know, when you have a invasive species that's impacting another species, it's important to have all of our other conservation issues figured out. You know, imagine being a snake that has an invasive lungworm and is also dealing with habitat loss, or is also dealing with a reduced amount of prey species. And these, so it makes it harder for them to survive in general. At the time I did the invasive lungworm story, there wasn't like research saying directly that the snakes are being killed by lungworm. It was that the lungworm parasite is causing so many issues with the snake health-wise. So, you know, there's factors that they were surveying, weight loss or snake fungal disease, all these different things that could be caused by a parasite. And so you have to be careful, because if you go too far on that emotional spectrum, uh, or to that emotional side of things, it kind of takes away from what the actual researched or factual conservation issue is. Yeah, so with the manatee story, I'm sure we're going to talk about with the armored catfish and the manatees. The armored catfish are harassing the manatee, but it's not directly killing the manatee. It's this species that's been introduced with the accumulation of other factors that is impacting Florida's manatees, or just Florida species in general. I think the only species, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of invasive species that have a direct connection to killing other species, native species. The pythons, for example, in South Florida. I mean, they're wiping out the mammal population. But yeah, it's important to balance, like you said, just balance the research, the facts with the emotional side of things.
So let's talk about your best of the world image of Ocala National Forest. How did that photo came about, and what makes that landscape globally significant?
Yeah, so that is a great example of just being out there and taking photos. I had no clue that photo was going to get published anywhere. I was just out in Ocala National Forest super early, just out taking photos. I honestly think I was just looking for, at the time, I was really big into using my 500 millimeter lens, and just going out and sitting and waiting and waiting for something to come by, so I could take photos of it. But that morning was right when winter was hitting, I believe. So it was starting to get, I'm going to sound like a wimp, but it does get cold in Florida. And I will fight for that fact as long as I live. It does get cold. But yeah, when it gets cold in the forest, all of that condensation, as the sun rises, that condensation turns into fog. So that's a moment I've seen very often throughout Ocala National Forest, or just through Florida in general, is that low rising fog. But what I love about that specific landscape when I was at that spot is you could see the wetlands, the prairie mixed in with that growing vegetation, and also the smaller pine trees with the taller pine trees in the back that kind of show the change of the habitat, the constant fluctuation, whether it be wildfires or manned habitat management here in Florida. The ecosystem is constantly breathing and changing. But yeah, I definitely love that photo. I have that photo hanging up on my wall over here. But yeah, it's actually the first photo I got published with National Geographic, and it was just out of nowhere. It was, I had pitched another story that was more conservation related, and I guess because of that pitch we sent to Nat Geo, another photo editor reached out to me after seeing my portfolio and said, "Hey, we're doing a best of the world list for 2025." I don't even know if she said that. I think she just said special project. Sometimes they tell you like, "Hey, we're working on," yeah. They might tell you, not super in depth what they're doing, but at least the idea of what they're doing. And then when you get that photo published, it ends up being this really cool topic. But yeah, I was super surprised to be reached out for that, and really excited to have that photo published. And my photo was on the masthead of Nat Geo's website for at least a day. I like to think it was at least a day. And it was just really cool. My first time photographing with National Geographic, and it's the masthead of their website. I just thought that was so cool. And being next to amazing photographers, there's I can't remember who all it was that was part of that best of the world list, but just going through the names of the other photojournalists, it was like, what the heck? This is so cool. Um, but yeah, that was just a very exciting moment for me at the time. But yeah, I guess the long story short is just constantly be taking photos, and even if it's not something you're working on at the moment, if it looks like a creative opportunity, definitely take the photo.
Yeah, but it's really great that you like sent in something and they liked your photos so much that they reached out to you. You can really be proud of you that your photos are so great, and it was definitely worth it taking so many photos and going out over and over and taking more and more.
Absolutely, yeah. I probably annoy the heck out of photo editors or just editors, people in general. I come from a small town, so I can be pretty chatty over the email. I'm not a efficient emailer. I have to give you everything, and I have a joke in there, one or two. That's probably a super cheesy joke, but editors are very busy people, great people, but they have hundreds, dozens, if not hundreds, of other photographers they have to email and filter through. But yeah, I try as best as I can to show that I'm passionate about what I do. Constantly have my work out there for them to see, have that portfolio, and I think that's definitely helped. I'm slowly growing as a photographer. But yeah, I think it's important to show that you're a human.
Yeah. And now we're going to the story you just mentioned earlier. In the story on armored catfish, you cover a species that's literally scrubbing the backs of manatees. What surprised you most when investigating this issue? And I also have the photos here that we can take a look at.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's if you don't know, manatee during the winter, or during the colder months, they come to Florida, our springs, because the springs naturally just feed warm water from the aquifer to the spring head. So manatees come from the ocean, and during the summer they're in the ocean, and during the winter they come over and they hang out and eat the vegetation here and throughout Florida, but Central Florida as well. I mean, there's beautiful springs here, massive springs that manatee love to be at and hang out at. And there are lots of conservation issues and habitat loss issues with the manatee with Florida springs. There's loss of vegetation. Springs get fairly overused, some more than others. Lots of issues with urbanization or development or urban sprawl that cause pollution in Florida springs. We're putting a lot of wear on our aquifer system as well, using spring water, which is causing the flow of freshwater springs to deplete, which is affecting the quality of the water, which makes it difficult for native species to survive, and causes things like algae growth that smothers vegetation. So a lot of these photos, you're going to see these sandy spots, or almost spots that are completely sandy. That's just from overuse by people or boats, or from just pollution or other habitat loss issues. And for these warm refuges in the winter, they need this vegetation to survive. And the problem with invasive species like the armored catfish is they tend to thrive in areas that have an imbalance. So you're going to see more armored catfish in places that have an imbalanced habitat than you are a native bass or a native catfish, or whatever it may be. And basically where these armored catfish come from is from the pet trade. They go by a variety of different names: sailfin catfish, plecos, armored catfish. They start out as these really tiny fish that you put in your fish tank. Some people call them janitor fish because they clean your fish tank. At least that's what they're supposed to do. And oh yeah, it's insane. They'll get 3 foot long. You're in there in the water sometimes, and it feels like a shark swimming by you. They're a pretty massive fish, and yeah, that's the problem, and that's a very common problem with invasive species that come through from the pet trade. Is people buy them when they're these little babies or these little juveniles, and they keep them for a while and they start to grow. They don't want to take care of this massive animal anymore, so early, I believe it was in the 40s that maybe I can't, not the 40s. I can't remember exactly when the armored catfish was introduced, but people just release these invasive species, and so the armored catfish ended up in our freshwater habitat, and because they are algae eaters, they eat all of the because of high nitrate levels. There's tons of algae right now in a majority of our freshwater springs. They eat all of the algae, so they have plenty to survive on, but they also eat the algae off of manatees' backs. So as you can see in this photo here, it's not just one armored catfish that will harass a manatee. It's multiple catfish. There's some insane footage that some researchers have of just dozens of catfish on the back of a manatee. And they'll just sit, they've learned to chase after these manatee and scrub the backs of these manatee and get the algae off of them. And it's not a sucker fish. It's not like a sucker-like motion. They have these bristly teeth and they just constantly scrub at the back of these manatee. So yeah, imagine, we get annoyed by flies as humans. Imagine having a fly that's like 3 times the size, constantly grabbing onto you, nibbling on you, and being annoyed by that, but also not having a proper habitat. So, all of these, so it's important to say they aren't directly being impacted or killed by armored catfish. But they do stress the heck out of these manatee, and it causes, based off the researcher I followed, her researcher, Dr. Gibbs, her research showed that armored catfish cause significant irritation, which causes the manatee to burn an insane amount of energy, an insane amount of calories. Manatees are these slow-moving animals. So it impacts their average everyday routine. So when you put that in addition with not having the right vegetation to graze, or not having the right warm water refuges to stay in, it all just adds up. And I guess I think you asked me what was like the craziest thing I experienced. It's just insane, the pursuit these catfish have with the manatee. I mean, it's a constant pursuit. They don't take breaks. The only time they take breaks is when the sun rises. They tend to go hide in the shade. But when you go out in the water late at night or very early in the morning, the manatee all gather to the spring head, and these armored catfish are just constantly pursuing the manatee. So the manatee are having to constantly roll around, kick them off, hit them with their flipper. It's just a very insane, unhealthy relationship. And so this photo here is of Dr. Gibbs, a very nice person. It's actually very funny. I asked her to bring her. She's a very nice and quiet lady, and very passionate about what she does. But she also spearfishes for armored catfish. She would catch hundreds at a time. I think she was, it's just an insane amount of catfish that they constantly spear to try to get rid of them. And so when I was photographing her, she pulled out this, I asked her to bring her spear, and she was just, instantly turned into spearfisher mode, just like super confident. It was just so funny how she just owned that photo shoot. It's fascinating how a researcher can be so kind and passionate about what they do, and then just get super aggressive about hunting these catfish.
Well,
And
if
so,
it's
yeah, this
hurting
is,
their researched animal, then
yeah,
they want to do something about it.
yeah. And so she's dedicated her life to the armored catfish and this interaction with catfish and manatee. And, she's got tons of mason jars full of preserved catfish that she has speared or someone else has speared. And uses them to educate her students. This is here in her student lab, and here's an example of what they look like when you buy them from the store. So a funny story behind this is I went to PetSmart and bought these catfish, which is crazy that you can buy these catfish, right? Even though they're,
you should think that they said no, not anymore. They were doing enough harm. You can't buy them anymore, but apparently not.
It's interesting, and there's certain invasive species that you definitely can't buy anymore, but some there are that you can just still purchase. And so what I did is I bought I think it was 2 or 3 of these little guys, and I kept them for a little bit, just enough for the photo shoot. And PetSmart had a return policy, and I just returned them back to the pet store. So I just took care of these store-bought fish for a few days and returned them, got my money back. But yeah, it's sad because it's a very interesting fish. They're also air breathers, so they go up to the surface to collect air and air breathe. But yeah, mainly I just wanted to show the how large they can get. They start out, you're not assuming that this catfish is going to get massive. And that's important for pet owners as well. If you want to get an exotic pet, you definitely need to take the time to research it and understand what this thing actually becomes when it grows up.
And I really love your style of photos and how you also put in film we call them protagonists, in front of your camera, like how you positioned her like that. Do you have also a storyboard, or how do you prepare for your shoots? And did you already think, did you already go there and you saw how the room looked like, and you checked how you would light it? Because I think it looks really, really amazing how you lit it as well, with the darks and what's bright. I really love how you did that. Can you talk a little bit more about how you prepare it and how you light inside there as well?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have a written out storyboard. Basically what I do is, I open up a Word document, and I just, I keep the Word app on my phone. So when I have a random photo idea that maybe is inspired by someone else's photo, or some just random idea I have, I'll write down that idea. And eventually, I'll narrow it down to a few things, or I'll just keep that whole list on me. And if an opportunity arises, I'll take that photo, or at least take the photos I can at that moment. I had never been to this lab before. I had talked to her over a video call, just to kind of discuss what she has, what photos I could take of. The problem is they weren't doing any spearfishing at that time. And because it's manatee season, there's not a lot of springs you can go to and just swim in or hunt for catfish in, because you want to make sure the manatee has good habitat that's not being impacted by people constantly swimming through it or just hunting. So I had to get a little creative of how I wanted to express this researcher, what work she does, maybe that more aggressive side of the hunting, as well as just, what she's dedicated her life to. I'm a big fan of that dramatic lighting when you're showing the sad part of something. And it also helps to emphasize certain characteristics of a photo. I love the griminess of her lab, her research lab. I love that you can see where there's just so much wear, so much dust and debris. A lot of people don't like that. I think a photo doesn't have to be beautiful to have good dynamics or composition. I think it's important to show just how the workplace or the griminess of something, especially if it's a topic that's a little bit more on the sad side, or the I guess you could say the antagonist of the story. So yeah, I think the lighting I chose really helps add some drama to what this fish is doing in both research and as an invasive species in our habitats here.
For sure. And you said, so the manatees you were photographing at night?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's tough because springs are a protected place. There's very few you can go to, so you have to, and also lots of places you have to go and pay, or there's not boat access or kayak access. So, and the other important factor is armored catfish are primarily nocturnal, so they're going to be more active at night. So obviously I can't go pay a day pass at a spring to get in and take those armored catfish because there's not going to be armored catfish. So there's this one spring that's been getting lots of overuse and has been a big conservation concern, and that's Silver Glen Springs. So we would either go out, by boat or by kayak to this spring at night, or very early in the morning before sunlight to photograph this interaction. And you have to cross Lake George, which is it's insane the waves you get on that lake. We don't have a massive boat. Yeah, it feels like the open ocean sometimes, and it's freezing cold, and I'm getting splashed by this freezing cold water, and I'm in I'm covered head to toe in like what looks like a Mount Everest suit. I've gotten super wimpy since I moved to Florida, but yeah, it's so you have to cross that freezing cold water, and then you get to the spring, and it's the winter time. So it feels very cold out. You put your hand in that 72-degree water and it feels like it's boiling. You instantly get into that water and it's insanely warm. And it's just an awesome thing. But, it just shows why the manatees want to be there. And also during the day, the manatees tend to go out towards the spring run because it is getting a little bit warmer. So they can, acclimate to that steadily increasing water temperature.
So did you bring underwater lights then as well? Did you mount them on your camera, or did someone else light for you?
No. So, yeah, I have some continuous lights as well as my strobes. It's a very rudimentary, cheap setup. I bought these flashes that came in an Adidas shoebox off of eBay. And yeah, he sent them in an Adidas shoebox, but I think they're CNC brand flashes from like 2008, and so I had to adapt to my underwater housing. I use an Ike light housing, and because they don't have a built-in continuous light, I had to mount these massive Amazon continuous lights just to be able to see what I was doing at night. Yeah, and yeah, the important thing is you don't want to constantly be using strobes with a protected species. You want to be very considerate of the species. So you don't want to chase and run up onto a manatee. And a lot of these manatees are very curious. So they'll come up to you. You're not supposed to touch them, but they will scrub onto you and rub their backs or, swim underneath you and cuddle with you. So yeah, you just have to, understand that you're in their habitat, they're a protected species. Do as best as you can to pick the best moments to introduce yourself to that species. You don't want to harass it too much with flash photography or being in its face.
Did you free dive and snorkel with them?
Oh yeah.
Is that there or somewhere else? The photo.
This is actually at Salt Springs. So yeah, that's actually a very interesting location. Armored catfish are there as well, and they sit right at the spring head. So they do a pretty good job of surviving in both this salt freshwater mix water as well as freshwater. Yeah, it's and this is just I honestly don't know why I took this photo. I can't remember. I think I was just playing around because the sun had just come up. There was no more catfish around. So I was just taking photos, taking some selfies. But there's very interesting habitat right at the spring head. And there's just a hole that goes into an aquifer system, and the catfish will just hang out right there. They'll take advantage of that warm water system.
Yeah, it's definitely amazing to get to know about that. I didn't know that the manatees also had that problem. I'd love to see a manatee sometime, but hopefully until I can get there, that problem will be a bit more solved.
Oh yeah, definitely let me know. Plenty of opportunity here in Central Florida to see a manatee during the wintertime. Be happy to take you out here and get some photos.
Sounds great. We'll definitely take you up on that sometime. And as we talked about earlier a little bit, you've been documenting the gopher tortoise, a keystone species in Florida. What makes this animal so critical and so threatened? And we have the photos here as well.
Yeah, it's a very awesome species, and people love them here in Florida. But it's very easy to undermine their significance here in Florida. So the reason it's a keystone species, and for people who may not know what a keystone species is, it's kind of this understanding of when you have an archway made of stones or brick, you have your top brick, your keystone, that holds the archway together. So if you get rid of that keystone, the rest of the archway, the rest of that habitat or species or whatever completely is impacted significantly. So the reason the gopher tortoise is a keystone species is because it creates burrows, hence the name gopher tortoise. It creates burrows that houses hundreds, I believe the number used most frequently is 350 different species here in Florida. So you have lots of open air habitat that these gopher tortoises build burrows in, as well as other species that navigate through or rely on to navigate through. And they rely on these burrows for housing, for refuge, for hunting, whatever it may be. I mean, there's flies to wasps to the gopher frog, to different mammal species, rabbits or armadillos that can be found using these burrow systems that go for dozens of feet. And these tortoises get massive, and it's this perfect semicircle archway that these gopher tortoises build, and it's the exact shape. You can tell the size of the tortoise by the size of the burrow. It's like almost exact to what their size would be. So yeah, there's lots. So when you get rid of the gopher tortoise, or if the gopher tortoise is taken out of its habitat, there's no longer that keystone significance. There's no longer that burrow for species to use. Another important thing is during wildfires, these gopher tortoises build these burrows to hide during wildfires, and other species will run and hide in these burrows as well. So it plays many roles, and it's a very intricate burrow system with smaller burrows here and there inside of it, where these different species will, make their home. And so the gopher tortoise has a direct connection to habitat loss. So when you sadly, we love to develop on land that gopher tortoises also like to build on. We have sand scrub, longleaf pine habitat, sand pine scrub, whatever you want to call it. We have this amazing habitat for the gopher tortoise to build these burrows and live in, but it's also habitat that is targeted by development, urban sprawl. And so Florida has an awesome group of conservationists that promote the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is this concept that we protect a huge piece of land that allows, or connected pieces of land that allow wildlife to move up and down north and to South Florida. And you have to not only protect this land, but you also have to make sure that it is breathing, that is constantly circulating. The gopher tortoise and many other species here in Florida rely on that open, airy space with low-lying vegetation that they can eat, graze, whatever it may be. The problem is, yeah, we can protect this habitat, but we also need to make sure that it is circulating, that it is at least being managed. Urban sprawl, even though it is not directly tied to the wild areas we protect, it does impact them because we have to suppress any sort of wildfires that could impact those urban areas. So, yeah, even though this development's not directly tied to the land we protect, it's important that we implement these habitat management systems that help keep the habitat breathing. Otherwise, it just becomes overgrown. It becomes thick, dense brush that nothing can move through, and it becomes very dense longleaf pine ecosystem that's not suitable for the gopher tortoise and many other species and species that rely on the burrows. So yeah, I think it's important to show how biocomplex or biodiverse these habitats are. Because the gopher tortoise, it isn't a flashy animal. It doesn't have these cool stripes or anything. It's very gritty looking, and it's almost camouflaged to its environment. They're either very dark brown or this light tan color. And it's very easy to look at them and think of them as just this simple tortoise animal, but they have a huge impact on the environment as a keystone species. It's very important it has a direct connection to habitat loss. It's very important not just to protect the wildlife habitat, but to also make sure that we have these healthy wildfires that move through to clean the land, to make room for burrows, but also the smaller vegetation that the gopher tortoise eats, grazes on, as well as any vegetation or habitat that other species may need. So yeah, it's very complex, and it's a story I'm currently working on and hoping to show not just the sad aspects of habitat loss and urban sprawl, but also the importance of, the great work that Floridians, these passionate researchers and conservationists are doing to not just protect the land, but to make sure that it's clean, that it's healthy, and it's going through its natural cycle of burning and regeneration.
It sounds like a very important project you're working on there. And yeah, this tortoise also sounds really cool, and that so many different animals are using the burrows that they are creating there.
Oh, no, it's awesome. Yeah, like I said, I'm still working on the project. I'm hoping to do some camera trapping. I've already started, and the thing that's tough about the gopher tortoise is it kind of beats to its own drum. There's not like this direct time where you're 100% going to see a gopher tortoise. People, when you go online and research when a gopher tortoise is going to be easy to spot, it's either mid-morning or mid-afternoon when the sun's not insanely hot, but enough for them to warm up and bask, get some sun on them. But just from camera trapping and trying to narrow down my case group, I guess you could say, and following these specific tortoises to photograph, you realize that they beat to their own drum, and they'll come out at like 2 in the morning to go and eat food, or they'll come out in the middle of a rainstorm to go dig out the front of their burrow. It's pretty interesting, being able to camera trap and just see exactly when they're coming out. There's so much research that shows when they're most likely to come out and be seen or hang out outside their burrows. But yeah, when you narrow down what tortoises you're photographing, whether it be just a couple, 2 or 3, you start to realize that they just kind of do their own thing, man. And you have to be patient. Something that's also very interesting, at least I find interesting, that's not talked about much, is when you have a species like a gopher tortoise that's in maybe a area that has some development or human movement or just human to wildlife interaction, those tortoises become super comfortable with people. So they'll come out and graze, eat flowers, or dig at their burrow or poke their head out of the burrow while there are just people around, maybe a few feet away photographing them. In Ocala National Forest, there's tortoises out there that I might be the first human they've ever seen, and they do not like me, and they will book it into their burrow. Like they're insanely fast. Even though I guess the common cliche is that tortoises are slow. These dudes can book it if they want to. They can really be fast, and they'll slide into their burrows as soon as they see you as a threat. They have great eyesight. They have a great sense of smell that allows them to graze on flowers, predict, wildfire smoke, whatever it may be. But yeah, I've really been wanting to challenge myself in showing how important big pieces of protected property are, like Ocala National Forest. And it's awesome to see these gopher tortoises in their native habitat and with very little human interaction, but it also makes it a very tough project. So yeah, you kind of have to balance out how you photograph the species and what resources you're using to photograph the species.
Yeah, I think wildlife photography is often just a waiting game and hiding. And they're like, you said you like to run around with your 500mm lens. And there's something like this can also be quite useful. So you can be further away and still photograph it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you want to be as close as possible. And you also have to consider that, it's, in my opinion, when you're using a wide angle lens or, like 24mm or whatever, you're able to capture more of the scene. And, with the 500mm, your field of view is very narrow. So you don't always get the best shots. But it's great for when you have a species that's shy. So there's so many factors. You don't want to harass a protected species. So you have to pick and choose your battles, when the gopher tortoise is comfortable, maybe pull out your wide angle lens, get some photos, get close. But when that animal is kind of, sketched out by you a little bit, it might be best to, use that longer lens, take a step back.
So I have some more photos here that you sent me we can take a look at. And then it would be great if you could tell us about the projects that we're going to see and how you took those photos.
Oh, yeah. So this is with the Florida Springs Institute. They're the longest running research nonprofit organization that does studies here in Florida Springs and advocates for Florida Springs conservation. And turtle surveys have become popular because these turtle populations are great. Give us a great understanding of the health of their habitat of Florida Springs, how springs in general are doing ecologically, if there is a concern. So yeah, this was actually a survey conducted, I believe, started by Bill Hawthorne, a friend of mine and researcher at the time at the Florida Springs Institute. And basically, it's community driven. Like most of the people in the background are researchers from other organizations that come out here to help collect and count turtles. So yeah, basically we go out on a boat, go out in the water. Everybody's snagging, grabbing these turtles, putting them on the boat, taking them to the shore, putting them in a certain box, counting them and taking measurements, or just doing surveys with them. And then they take them back on the boat and release them where they found them. And this is all permitted research. But yeah, it's an awesome, not only is it awesome research that shows the health of springs and the impact of wildlife smuggling, all sorts of things, it's also just a great emblem and symbol for how fun conservation can be. And, you know, it's awesome seeing all these researchers work together, all these volunteers work together to work for free to research this species. And so, yeah, this was just, this guy was an escape artist, pretty big turtle. I believe it's a female. You can tell if it's a male or a female by the size of its claws. So if it's smaller claws, it's a female, most likely. I might not be the best person to ask that, but yeah, it's this one was an escape artist, and it kept trying to climb out of the box. And so yeah, I just thought it was a really cool shot, you know, to show the researchers in the background, and also just show, you know, this turtle being in this environment. And so all of those boxes you see were full of different kinds of turtles. Most of them were just kind of chilling out. You know, you put them in the sun around this time of day. They like to bask in the sun, catch some rays. So, but yeah, this one was just trying to get out of the box. It was a larger turtle, so it was very capable of to doing that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that must have been really a lot of turtles with all the boxes there.
Oh yeah, no, it. Yeah, I have some photos. It's just this tiny John boat, this metal boat that the researchers use, and Bill's in there. You can basically only fit 2 or 3 people in the boat because you have all these boxes of different turtles hanging in there. But yeah, I've got photos of just Bill manning the boat with tons of boxes of turtles. But yeah, I should have a project being published soon about all of this work and how it's so community driven. But yeah, it's just an awesome. I'm very thankful and fortunate to know Bill, and I really appreciate him taking the time to let me tag along and cover his research. Yeah, this is out on the Silver River. So yeah, like I said, these are all researchers from different organizations that just volunteer to be here. They, you know, in the process of chasing down these turtles, you know, everybody's free diving. You know, they can be pretty quick in the water, and they hide in the dense vegetation. So you to gun it, you gotta book it to catch up with these some of these turtles. So it kicks up a lot of debris, lots of sand, and you know, some cases that's kind of a bummer because it makes it very difficult to photograph when you have low water clarity. But in other cases, it makes these really cool light rays that go through the water. And yeah, I just love shots like that. And it was really cool how the shot lined up. You had all 3 researchers collecting turtles at the same time. But yeah, Silver River is by far one of my favorite. From what I understand, there are lots of conservation concerns with the Silver River and the Silver Springs. But for the most part, it is a fairly healthy habitat as far as you know, vegetation and some of the species. There are tons of invasive species in there, like the tilapia population in the spring is insane. But there are lots of positive aspects to look at with that spring. And usually you're not allowed to swim in Silver River and Silver Springs. So all of this swimming was a very unique opportunity that was all done under, you know, permit, a research permit.
I think it's good that you can't swim there just for fun, because if you see Yeah, how the habitat there is. I think if there would be a lot of people, then it probably would be destroyed really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that at other springs. It's a really sad fact. I've talked to state park employees at the spring, at springs that are just covered in algae, nothing but sand, no native vegetation. And, here's this lady who works part-time at the state park, has been a local for, 40 years, since she was a kid, whatever, however long. And she used to swim there when the eelgrass was all the way up to the brim at the peak of the water. And now it's just a completely empty hole. And you can't give up on these areas either. There's proof that there's plenty of springs they've shut down from human use that rejuvenate, become perfect habitat again. I shouldn't say perfect, but significantly healthier. And so you can't give up on these habitats when you see the how poor in health they are, because there are opportunities to fix these locations.
Here we have another turtle.
Yes. If you don't know, I love turtles. I love tortoises. The whole concept, the whole concept of a tortoise or a turtle, just the way they evolved to have a shell that they can just hide in. I mean, that's just insane to me. I think it's just such a cool concept. And then you have like snapping turtles, where they have evolved to not only hide in their shell, have that shell for defense, but if you get too close to them, they will bite the crap out of you. And I just think it's just so cool, the turtle in general. Sadly, there's lots of concerns with turtle populations here in Florida. Wildlife smuggling. I mean, throughout the world, wildlife smuggling is a huge problem. But wildlife smuggling in Florida, tortoises and turtles are a major species that's impacted. People will stuff them into socks, into boxes, ship them overseas to other countries where they're used as food and as pets. It's really sad. This is a saltwater turtle. So it's a diamondback terrapin. Actually was part of the Mangrove Photography Awards with this photo. And it's one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. It was very random when I first spotted these diamondback terrapins on the Gulf Coast. They're a very elusive species, and they usually hang out in places that are very marshy, poor water quality. Usually photograph the butts of them. They're always running away from them. They know you're there before you know they're there. Randomly, I was out at night photographing whatever I could, and I had something rub up against my chest, and I was like, what the crap? And I looked down, I'm underwater, and I looked down, and there's this massive shell, this white turtle. And I think through my snorkel, I muffly said, what the heck? And this turtle, and I scared it, and it booked away. And all I saw was just this white shelled turtle. I was like, what the heck was that? Was that an albino snapping turtle, saltwater snapping turtle? And I looked it up. I was like, oh, it's a diamondback terrapin. I didn't even think about the diamondback terrapin being out there. Turns out it's a great habitat, this section of the Gulf Coast, this shallow mangrove island marshy habitat. And they're the apex predators in these habitats. It's a really cool animal. It's just a weird animal to have in a saltwater ecosystem, in my opinion. And not a lot of people recognize it here in Florida, or just throughout the U.S. There's tons of people that just do not know it exists. It's got to be one of my favorite turtle species. And basically, eventually I learned that you could take advantage of the changing tide and use these mangrove islands as a place to get clear shallow water, as well as be able to narrow the area you're looking for these turtles. So basically, when the tide goes down, they just swim in circles inside these mangrove islands. There's these holes inside the mangrove islands. And yeah, I just got these really cool shots of them swimming around. They also have these, I'm not sure the exact science behind it or the exact way they make these burrows or use these burrows, but they have these dugout trenches under the mangrove roots. So what you see in the photo is mangrove roots. And they'll dig into them and hide underneath them and poke their head out for safety. Not exactly sure what for, but it is something that I witnessed while swimming with them. But it's such an awesome species.
Looks like it's posing.
Yeah. So it was that was when it was coming out of its little hole, its little hideaway,
okay.
and coming up for air. Yeah, and turtles have insanely long necks. I think is always cool to see when they're comfortable to kind of expose their neck like that. And that's also while you're photographing turtles, it's important to understand that this is also a pose they do when they're going up for air. So you have to be careful about disturbing them too much. When they're acting this way, you want to give them a little bit of space. That way they can go up and breathe and come back down. Then you can start photographing them again. But no, a very awesome species, and that Gulf Coast ecosystem is just an awesome area. Being able to film in those mangroves, it's very tough because it's shallow. Depending on the tide, like you can see in this photo, depending on the tide, the water clarity is very poor. In this shot, I was very fortunate enough to sneak up on this turtle, and it had its back, or its butt facing me, and it was up getting air, and it came back down and turned right at me. And they're very curious. I don't know if they see the reflection through your dome on your camera housing. I don't know what it is, but they have a little bit of curiosity before they realize you're human and swim away.
And for the last question, what tips would you offer to aspiring conservation photojournalists, especially those looking to break into storytelling with limited resources?
If I had any advice to give, it's just to constantly be taking photos, taking advantage of the time you have. Just constantly pursuing different photo opportunities, even if it's something that just comes out of the blue. I've had so many photos published that were just out of the blue. I wasn't planning to get them published. I wasn't planning to do a story with them. So you want to take advantage of those opportunities. And even if they don't turn out great, you're still learning from them. So constantly just putting your work out there, being in that realm. It's just something that, you have to continuously build, keep these different ideas in the back of your head. Eventually it becomes secondhand to your workflow. I think there's like these tips and tricks that, you could give people to get published. But I think it's important to stand for something, be human, no matter how imperfect of a human you are, just be the best person you can be. Just constantly be pursuing photos that you're passionate about. Try to find those intimate, passionate moments that tell a story.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much for having been on the podcast and sharing your story and your advice and your beautiful photographs. And I hope to see more of your work soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, very excited. First podcast I've ever done. I think this was an awesome
you did great.
opportunity. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. No, super fun. And I hope to do more stuff like this again. Absolutely.